Hello and welcome to today's episode of the GrowVC Everyone Funding Startups podcast. In our recent episodes, we've been talking about the startup world in Silicon Valley and the surrounding greater area, but the US is a lot bigger than that. Today we're talking not about Silicon Valley, but the Midwest. I'm your host Marcus, and I'm joined by Brian Mayer and Jonathan Paskey, two of the founders of MidVentures Launch, the largest startup conference in the Midwest. So Brian and John, why don't you guys introduce yourself to our audience?
Oh, thanks, Marcus. This is John Paskey. I am a patent attorney here in Chicago and one of the founders of MidVentures Launch.
I'm Brian Mayer. I'm originally a web developer and the co-founder of MidVentures, which is a consulting firm in Chicago. And we started MidVentures Launch very recently.
All right, before moving on, let's look at a startup from the venture community in our member highlight. And this week, that's a startup called Heppnigames. Heppnigames aims to change the way social games are played. And they're looking for a co-founder to take their venture to the next level. If you're interested, check out Heppnigames in the community or on heppnigames.com. Then let's continue with the actual episode. Yeah, let's talk about the conference first. So could one of you give us kind of a short introduction to what is MidVentures Launch?
Sure. So MidVentures Launch is a startup and innovation conference that we put together here in the Midwest. A lot of your listeners will probably be familiar with the TechCrunch 50 conferences, TechCrunch Disrupt conferences going on in Silicon Valley, and also the demo conference that's out there as well in San Francisco that just moved up there this year. MidVentures Launch is a conference very similar to that. We have 3 tracks. One is the compete track for early stage startups, where we have over $100,000 in prizes for early stage startups to win. We have a series of celebrity judges from the entrepreneur space that will be judging those startups. We have a launch track that will be later stage startups and also established companies that will be promoting and displaying some new innovations, some new on stage, and then the others new for 2010. And then a third track, which is our MV demo area, which is a demo pit for 50 to 75 brand new startups to showcase their products and services to the crowd.
And you're 2 of the 3 partners that founded the conference. So how did it begin? How did it start?
It's a funny story, Marcus. So MidVentures, which Brian is a founder of as a consulting firm, had been throwing some smaller events here around Chicago and had some big names that were coming to these events. We were getting about 50 to 75 people out to these events. We had guys from startups here in Chicago, like Mike Sampson from CrowdSpring, Andrew Mason from Groupon, just to talk about certain different subjects. And, I came along. I was working for a startup here in Chicago called FanFound in the music space, and also starting my own law firm. And I hooked up with Brian and Jeff over here in Chicago for MidVentures and said, look, we need something in the Midwest that emulates what the coasts are doing. We have the TechCrunch conferences out on the coasts, but we don't have anything here in the Midwest for the entrepreneurs and the startups. And so back in March, we started and came up with an idea that was very similar to a demo day and a pitch contest for startups, and we call it MidVentures 25. And we did that in March, and we got a much bigger turnout than we expected. We ended up with about 500 people, 25 startup companies demoing, and we gave away over $15,000 in prizes, cash and prizes. And after March, we decided, well, heck, there's a big following here in Chicago and the Midwest surrounding us for something like this. We got a much bigger turnout than we expected. So we went ahead and for 6 months later in September 27th and 28th of this year, started planning MidVentures Launch.
And what do you expect from this event at the end of September?
Well, one of the things, Marcus, that has surprised us the most with this whole putting together of this conference is how enthusiastic Chicago and the Midwest is about startup entrepreneurship. It's something that we always knew existed. Of course, some great startups have come out of Chicago, like FeedBurner and like Groupon most recently. But we didn't expect that the community was so large and was so interested in having a central space for a demo, for startups to demo, for them to launch on stage. So what we're really expecting from this conference, to answer your question, is finally a space in Chicago where web entrepreneurs, startup entrepreneurs, people in mobile and in tech in Chicago can really get out on stage, can really meet the VCs that they need to grow. We sort of jokingly refer to Chicago as flyover country, because a lot of VCs, even though they're based here, or a lot of VCs in Silicon Valley or New York, will fly over Chicago to get to where they're funding their companies. And we don't want that to be the case anymore. We want Chicago to be a leader in entrepreneurship as well. So we're really hoping that this event will be a step in that direction.
Yeah, and it's funny. So this year, I don't know, Marcus, you're familiar with the Y Combinator and Techstars model for incubators. Chicago just had one that started up this summer. We had our first one called Accelerate Labs. And it was run by a guy named Sam Yagan, who was the CEO of OkCupid. He had also started SparkNotes and eDonkey, which is really actually big. You might have heard it was big in Europe as a file sharing service. But basically, we got the guys from Techstars, David Cohen and Brad Feld, to help out, really put that together and energize it here in Chicago for Accelerate Labs. And so we had 10 companies in the last week here that just graduated from that, went through their demo day, and it's great. About 5 of those companies have already been seed funded in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, which is really, really great pickup for a class of startups in a labs section in an incubator session like Y Combinator or Techstars. And so we're seeing a lot of activity around this here in Chicago and the Midwest. And also, it's not just Chicago. I mean, we're focused here in Chicago. We're based in Chicago. But what really happens is, we're pulling from incubators in Michigan, in Kansas City, in Minneapolis, St. Louis, Indianapolis. We're pulling from all across the Midwest, all the startups that, have smaller communities, and bringing them all to Chicago, pulling the startup entrepreneurs, pulling the companies and the people inside those companies, and then also pulling the investors, bringing those three teams to the table and saying go. And going back to your question, what are we going to get out of that? We don't really know. But if it's any indication from what happened at MidVentures 25, 6 of the companies at MidVentures 25 from March that we picked, we got about 65 applications in March, and we picked 25 to go up and demo their products. And 6 of those companies have actually made it to incubators or have won a venture challenge. So 2 of them made it to Accelerate Labs this summer. 1 of them went down to Austin for the Capital Factory. 1 went to Dream It Ventures out in Philadelphia, and another one went out to Techstars in Boulder. The final one actually won the New Venture Challenge at the University of Chicago, which was a $30,000 prize. So we're seeing that, even from our 6 months that we've been in this, picking those companies, giving them a stage to perform on and to get in front of investors, we're seeing a lot of activity here in the Midwest. Now, that being said, what I just said was, a lot of those companies went outside the Midwest to join incubators. Only 2 of them really stayed here. And so one of the things we're really doing is to try to make the community grow here in Chicago and around the Midwest.
Yeah, there seems to be kind of a global sweep, well, especially focused on the US, but with different sort of incubator programs, seed funding programs, and these sort of pressure cookers for startups. Since Accelerate Labs was the first of its kind over there, what was the reception like for that?
Oh, yeah, it was great. Brian, do you want to?
Yeah, no. Well, John, why don't you take it?
Okay, yeah. So we just went to the demo day last Monday and Tuesday, Marcus, and they had over 200 investors They did a really good job of flying in